A few years ago, China couldn't get enough of Australian exports.
Hello, world. Hello, dog. Hello, cute guy out for a jog.
Each year, we sent China $1.2 billion worth of barley for brewing beer and feeding livestock, and $1.3 billion worth of Australian wine, from fancy Penfolds to cheap and cheerful Yellowtail.
Hello, Yellow. Hello to having an awesome hair day and finding that missing sock. Hello to all these vibrant...
In this Yellowtail ad, a friendly Australian woman dances through a pastel picnic fairyland, clutching a glass of Australian white wine.
You know, the bright side feels pretty good. Hello, Yellow.
And then it all went sour. As word of a deadly new pandemic spread the world in early 2020, Australia moved quickly to impose restrictions on travellers from China. And then, the moment everything changed, Scott Morrison and Foreign Minister Marise Payne supported the idea of an inquiry into the origins of COVID-19.
We will always stand our ground when it comes to the things that we believe in and the values that we uphold.
The issues around the coronavirus are issues for independent review, and I think it is important that we do that. In fact, Australia...
Enraged, Xi Jinping's government in Beijing deployed the full might of the world's second largest economy and our largest trading partner to punish Australia. Authorities in Beijing slapped tariffs around 80% on Australian barley and tariffs closer to 200% on bottles of Australian wine. The tariffs acted as a gigantic price bump. So even though China didn't outright ban most Australian exports, it effectively made them unaffordable for Chinese citizens and businesses. We were sending China $1 billion worth of rock lobsters per year. China imposed a new rule that every shipment had to be intercepted and inspected for so-called contamination, effectively ending the trade. They did the same thing to wheat shipments. Beef from some abattoirs was banned. Cotton imports were restricted. Coal shipments were halted.
There was this feeling that this was going to be a massive, massive hit.
Patrick Commons is the Australian's economics correspondent.
Well, there was a feeling that it was going to, among economists and people who, trade experts, it was a feeling that this was going to cost us tens of billions of dollars. We had our biggest, our most important trade partner using trade as a kind of a coercive measure against us. This following years of people talking about how we're over-reliant on China, we're relying on too much. They buy all our coal, they buy all our iron ore. What happens if they go under? What happens if they decide they don't want to buy it anymore? And there was talk about, trying to convince the government that how important our trade partner was and, and really should we be poking the panda, so to speak. When it came to things like trade, there was a great deal of trepidation and fear.
Here's the twist. China's punitive trade moves didn't kill the Australian economy, and it may have made us stronger.
The hit to national output was less than 0.01%. It's a bit over 200 million, which sounds like, big money to you and me, but we've got a $2.5 trillion economy. You can see that this has not moved the dial.
One obvious strategy for Australian companies was to dodge China's restrictions. Yellowtail, for example, began making wine in South America. Penfolds' parent company Treasury Wine Estates began making its Rawson's Retreat label in South Africa, as well as buying Chinese-grown grapes to make newly rebranded wines in China itself. And at the same time, smart Australian firms worked hard on finding new markets, and they were helped by the fact China's reduced demand pushed prices down. So suddenly our goods were cheaper and therefore more appealing to other buyers. Yellowtail, for example, shifted its focus to the US and now sends more than 50% of its exports to America. Other winemakers shifted to the EU, Canada and the UK.
Our exporters found other markets. So, our barley exporters found markets. They sold a lot to the Middle East. Coal exporters found markets in India. Even our wine exporters, they copped in the short term. But then, because wine, you can store it, and some of it actually gets better when it's in storage. They found alternatives for that as well. So things like lobsters did suffer more than others because, you can't put a lobster in a wine cellar and expect to sell it 6 months later. So this diversification, this finding other sources that were more than happy to buy our goods.
One thing in our favour was that products like barley, wheat and cotton are globally valuable commodities. And in many cases, there were other customers.
It's not like we're selling a certain type of product into China, which only the Chinese want, and then we turn around, no one else wants to buy it. Well, everyone wants coal, everyone wants our wine. Well, not everyone, maybe the French don't, but a lot of people want our wine and our other products.
Coming up, so what does China take from the fact this didn't really work out? One Australian product didn't take a hit during China's campaign of economic punishment: iron ore. Here's Pat Commons again.
Well, I guess it's a question of mutual vulnerability, right? I mean, we rely on them to buy our iron ore and they rely on us to supply it. So, we're a massive and probably, I think we're the world's biggest, we will be the world's biggest supplier of iron ore. China has a voracious appetite for iron ore. They have continued to pour a lot of money into infrastructure, into property, into building. All of that needs steel. And so they need iron ore. So China's been a little selective, been very selective here in, what they apply trade sanctions to. They don't want to hurt their own economy at the cost of making a political point.
China has quietly unwound some of the trade barriers to Australian goods. Like wheat, there's evidence that exports have continued, with record volumes heading north from Australia this year. Chinese buyers are now picking up Australian cotton again, which suggests the ban on mills buying our raw materials has been dropped.
The lesson from the PC is global trade is good. Keep the global trade lanes open, reduce tariffs, reduce taxes. Globalisation is far from dead. And we, as a small open economy that relies on trade, we should be champions for free trade around the world. And they say the fact that our exporters have been able to find other markets when one of our big customers shut down was because global trade is so free. We could turn around and India was happy to buy our coal and there weren't any restrictions on our exporters being able to find another market. So they say this is another demonstration of why free trade is so important to Australia. Because, when we do lose one market, even as big as China, for some of these really important goods, we're able to turn around and find another customer easily. And that's a real boon of global trade.
For the past decade or more, China's approach to the world has been elbows out. Here's Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian attacking America and the FBI for unfairly slurring China's reputation. They call it wolf warrior diplomacy, named after a stirring patriotic action flick from a few years back about an elite Chinese military unit taking down baddies. This is the movie trailer. And Pat, just finally, if you're Xi Jinping sitting in Beijing watching this gradual apparent unwinding, what are you thinking? Did this work? Was this a good way to use China's economic might?
Yeah, it's a good question. China has quite a long history of using trade as a form of economic coercion when people upset it. South Koreans upset it, the Norwegians upset it, and they did similar things over the past decade. So there has been a pattern of this. It does make you wonder, certainly hasn't changed our minds. Will they use the same tactics again? That's a really interesting question. And who knows what goes on in the Politburo in Beijing. But you'd have to think that maybe they will think twice before they do something like this again, because we do have this experience now, knowing that we can get through it and reasonably comfortably.
Patrick Commons is the Australian's economics correspondent. The Prime Minister's off to New Zealand this week, and there's a push for a dramatic overhaul of trans-Tasman relations, including coordinating our attempts to mitigate climate change. You can read all about that right now at theaustralian.com.au.